Hey guys, before we begin this review proper, we have to address the elephant in the room when talking about this movie. In particular, its lead, Bette Midler. So, on July 24th, Midler put out this tweet, and I'm looking at my computer over here to read it. Women of the world, we are being stripped of our rights over our bodies, our lives, and even our name. They don't call us women anymore. They call us birthing people or menstruators and even people with vaginas. Don't let them erase you. Every human on earth owes you. Now, of course, if you look at the dialogue of that, a bunch of people, myself included, read this as incredibly transphobic. Even if she didn't mean it, it came off as transphobic because it sounds like it's adhering to the turf belief that, trans women are not women, which scientifically and factually speaking is not true. And when she was called out for this, the next day, she put this out. People of the world, my tweet about women was a response to this fascinating and well-written piece in the New York Times on July 3rd. There was no intention of anything exclusionary or transphobic in what I said. It wasn't about that. The problem was that the piece she's citing was written by a TERF, and the article itself was a hit piece against trans women. And the tone and the cadence and the wording of her follow-up tweet there didn't come off so much as an apology, more as a digging her heels in and defending herself. And that follow-up tweet, too, is part of a thread, which I'm not going to put the whole thing up and read. If you want to, you can find it on her Twitter feed. She says things like, I've been fighting and an ally for 60 years. She's trying to flex her credentials. And she said, there is a bigger problem. We are all a victim of men. This whole thing, it's just... I was honestly desperately hoping this was a Mark Hamill situation. For context, if you don't know, Mark Hamill liked and supported a tweet J.K. Rowling made about her transphobic beliefs, but then people pointed out to him that, she was being transphobic, and he deleted his tweets and apologized. He said something along the lines of, I'm sorry, I didn't realize what she said. I've been educated. I hope to do better in the future. Please call me out if I screw up. So far, this has not been the case with Bette Midler. And honestly, I find that devastating. Because of Hocus Pocus, Bette Midler is an actress who I have loved since I was 4 or 5 years old. And this hurts, honestly. I don't want to say too much more on this because I'm not the right person to. I'm a cis male. But yeah, just until she puts out a proper apology and promises to at least try to do better, we, for the time being, have to accept the fact that Bette Midler is most likely a TERF and transphobic. I'm doing this here because, like I believe I said, I didn't have anywhere else in the video to put this. And saying nothing would have just been worse. This needs to be addressed. Because of that, because of the subject matter, if you do not want to watch this video, your feelings are valid, and I completely understand. Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Today, we are looking at Hocus Pocus 2, released on September 30th, 2020, as an exclusive to Disney+, directed by Anne Fletcher, starring Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy. As always, because I do these unscripted, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place. I'm going to try and avoid spoilers, except for one thing I really want to talk about in regards to this movie. So, if you haven't seen Hocus Pocus 2 and you want to before this review, you have been warned. And what's interesting is, I'm going to adjust this real quick. This is actually not the movie's first attempt, or actually before I even get into that, I kind of want to explain my relationship with Hocus Pocus, because Hocus Pocus does hold a special place in my heart. It was my childhood movie. I'm sure growing up, we all had one. The movie we watched on an endless loop. We probably watched it 2 or 3 times a day as a minimum. We watched it so much, we made everyone else in our house sick of it. So much that to this day, we could put on a one person show and recite the entire movie by heart. For me, Hocus Pocus was that movie. It is my favorite Disney movie. It is my favorite cult movie. And Winifred Sanderson is even my favorite Disney villain. So, as the massive fan I am, I was kind of iffy on the idea of doing a sequel because the plot is really self-contained and ends kind of on a perfect note. Despite how sequel baity the end of the movie is, I think it's more just for like, in a horror movie, like that final jump scare that doesn't really mean anything. That's how I think it ended. That's beside the point. What's interesting is that this is not excuse me. This is not Disney's first attempt at a sequel. I believe there was an attempt made earlier at some point that ultimately never came to fruition. So, they novelized it. I don't know if I kind of think I might want to review it. I don't know if I will because I'm a slow reader. Like, in fact, I'm still only on the Hocus Pocus segment of the book. But yeah, that might be a future video. Book review and comparing and contrasting both sequels. But suffice to say, when this sequel was announced, I had no faith in this project. Like, my standards were, the bar is on the ground. My standards were below that. So by those standards, this movie is better than I thought it was going to be. I hesitate to call it good. It's very mid. It's very average. There are some good moments and there are a lot of bad things that I didn't really care for. It was all over the place in my views, but like, yeah, I'd say it's about half good, half bad myself. And again, given how low my standards are, that's better than nothing. So, and one thing I will give the movie credit for is it is very sincere. In this era of legacy sequels and sort of quote unquote nostalgia baits, a lot of movies do have the tendency to be very cynical about what they're calling about the nostalgia they're mining. Like, I think the most recent Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie kind of had that vibe. But like, thankfully, this movie is obviously in the hands of people who loved the original. And what was I going to say? In fact, I think even one of the original writers, or the original writer for the first movie, wrote the script for this one as well. I didn't look at the credits. I should have. That's on me. But yeah, it's, this movie kind of takes the Halloween 2018 approach. It's written by people who obviously love and care about the original source material. And, just every frame of the movie obviously has a great deal of respect and reverence for it. It is very sincere. And I also like, because a lot of times movie sequels, bad ones at any rate, fall into this trap of, oh, let's just reskin and rehash the plot of the first movie, which it kind of looks like this movie is going to, and then ultimately doesn't. It ultimately is its own thing. So, like, the Sanderson sisters get resurrected, and, in the first movie, their plot was to brew a potion that would allow them to consume the life force of children to gain eternal youth. This movie, after being tricked by teenagers, again, the Sanderson sisters decided to cast this deep, dark, forbidden spell that would make them infinitely powerful. It would make them the ultimate beings on Earth. Actually, now that I say that and make that comparison, it does kind of rehash the first movie a little bit. But not exactly, like, the first movie, let's be honest, it played out like a horror movie. Our leads stole the MacGuffin, Winifred Sanderson's spellbook, and the movie was an entire chase sequence trying to keep it away from them until, the climax where they finally had their confrontation. Again, it was for a kids movie and a comedy. Hocus Pocus is structured very much like a horror movie the more I think about it. But this movie, it plays along different beats, In trying to stop the Sanderson sisters, our protagonists are doing their own thing. Like, their paths very seldom cross in this movie. And that's really all I have to say about that. I felt like I was going to go somewhere else, but nope. So the plot structure is a little different, which is a good thing. The humor, because this movie is a comedy, is very hit and miss. I found a lot of the callbacks, a lot of the nostalgia baiting were some of the weakest jokes in this movie. Whereas a lot of the new ones they made, those were actually funny. Like, there's a scene in the trailer where they track the kids to a house. And I don't know if you can hear that, but the Blue Angels are in town, so they've been doing test flights all week, and sometimes it's annoying. Anyway, but like there's one scene in the trailers that's also in the movie, thankfully, where the Sanderson sisters track the kids to a house, and while they're hiding and the witches are looking for them, Winifred tells them to spread out. And Sarah sticks her arms out and starts going into a split. Spread out. That was hysterical. And thinking about it, that was probably one of the funniest jokes in the movie. And like I said, when the movie starts doing its own thing and stops calling back to the first movie, that's where a lot of this movie really shines. The performances are really good. Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Kathy Najimy are once again having a lot of fun in these roles. Like, I even think they've all said at one point Hocus Pocus was their favorite movie to make. And it still shows here. Like, they're all together. They have their amazing chemistry still. Although this movie seems kind of stacked, like, the first movie was very much an ensemble piece for all three of them. They acted as a group. They played off each other. They each got moments to shine. Here, it seems kind of unbalanced. Winifred and Sarah get a lot to do, but then Mary doesn't really have anything of note in this movie. Like, poor Kathy Najimy is so underserved by this script. I really wish they had given her more. She does have one or two things, but compared to the other two, she was done dirty by this movie. And I have to admit, because this movie also being set in 22 does a lot of updates. So, like, instead of a janitor's mop, Sarah now rides a Swiffer, and instead of a vacuum cleaner, Mary rides Roombas. Which, the Roomba thing, I'm sorry, ever since it was shown in the trailer, the Roomba thing is incredibly cringe. It's just, ugh, like, especially because vacuum cleaners still exist, like, bag vacuums don't, and the way vacuums are made now, you can't really ride those, but like, there's shark vacuums. It's just not a fan of the Roombas. Not a fan of Mary flying the Roombas. That being said, they actually do some funny stuff with the Roombas. Also on that regard, so whereas in the first movie, Winifred was my favorite, and Bette Midler, I felt, gave the best performance of the three, in this movie, the show stealer was Sarah Jessica Parker. Like, she was outstanding. All three of them were great, but I feel like Sarah Jessica Parker brought the most energy to her performance, and she was clearly having a lot of fun, which, makes sense because she tells this story while filming the first movie. She loved being in the harness when they would do the flight scenes. I'll get back to that in a moment. Like, she'd take like a crossword book or something up there with her, and she'd just stay in the harness for hours. Like, and again, that type of fun she's having here is really infectious. Like she is so energetic, and she really is the show stealer. She gets a lot of the really good jokes in this movie. Like, when the Sanderson sisters make it to their house and they kind of realize they don't want to make the potion cast this new spell instead. They're like, oh, our enemies have keep outsmarting us and keep getting to prosper, and what have we done? And Sarah just bluntly answers, die. Like Sarah gets the best jokes in the movie. There are other standouts of in the movie as well. Like you have Tony Hale as the mayor of Salem, and also in the opening flashback, he plays the reverend who originally banished the Sanderson sisters from Salem, and in both roles he's great. And he's about on par with them in terms of scenery chewing. He's clearly having a blast. Also, Hannah Waddingham shows up very briefly. Like, first of all, ever since Ted Lasso, I'm so glad Hannah Waddingham is getting so much more recognition lately. Like, I'm a big theater person, so I've known who Hannah Waddingham is, and now to finally see her start getting recognition is amazing. And she only has a very brief scene in the opening of the movie, but she goes at it with everything she's got, and she sells it, and she's spectacular, and I wish we had more of her. Doug Jones is back as Billy the Butcher, Billy Butcherson, and he's really good too. You know, now that his mouth isn't stitched shut, he gets a lot of really good jokes as well. I don't like how they changed his back. Well, first of all, Doug Jones's voice sounds different. Like, I'm not gonna bash it, but it kind of sounds like he forgot what Billy sounded like, which, you know, in June of 2023, this movie will be 30 years old. That's understandable. But he has a lot of really good moments to shine too. Let's see, anything else I want to go to? Well, since I'm on performances, let's talk about our leads. So Omri Katz, Thora Birch, and Vanessa Shaw did not come back. So we have new leads. Hang on just a second. I am going to pull up the Wikipedia. We have, one second, this Whitney Peak as Becca, Belissa Escobedo as Izzy, and Lila Buckingham as Cassie. And like the original movie, the leads are the least interesting parts of this movie. They do something interesting with Becca, which I won't get into, but like if you saw the trailers, they kind of give it away without giving it away, which good on trailers for doing that, because trailers tend to give everything away nowadays. But Izzy was my favorite of the three. Belissa Escobedo, just, she seemed to get what she was in, like the adults. Like, that was one of the weird weak points of Hocus Pocus. Like, all the adults knew what they were doing, and they were very over the top, very scene chewing, very hammy, but the kids took everything completely seriously. And really their performance kind of cinches that the more I think about this, the original Hocus Pocus was kind of a horror movie. And it's kind of the same trap here. The kids are really taking this seriously. They're written to be taking this seriously, whereas all the adults are doing everything over the top. But I don't really have, it's just, again, like I said, the protagonists are the least interesting part of this movie. And there's a lot of, well, there's some high school drama thrown in there that I just didn't care about. It's introduced and then it's resolved so quickly. It's clear that very little thought was put into that. I want to end talking about the ending because, God, again, this movie was very mixed for me. There were things I liked, things I didn't like. I'm gonna tear into that ending. So before I do, I have a couple of scattered thoughts. The flight in this movie does not look good. Like, here's the thing, the flight scenes in the original Hocus Pocus are some of my favorites. Probably because it's all practical. You know, the actresses were actually put into harnesses and suspended above the set, and it looks amazing. And then they put fans and wind machines on them, and it gives them this beautiful sense of movement. You know, and it just, the flight scenes are some of my favorites in the original because they look so gorgeous. Here you can tell that they obviously didn't do that. Like, there might be one or two scenes where they do. There's only really one I can think of, and it might have been a stunt double now that I think about it, but at the same time, it makes sense, you know? Bette Midler is in her 70s. Kathy Najimy, I believe, is in her 60s, and Sarah Jessica Parker is in her 50s. They probably cannot comfortably be suspended like that for long periods of time anymore. So it makes sense, but also it's like, at least if you had put the wind machines on them, it would have looked a little better. Just as they are, it doesn't look good. Or it doesn't look great, I should say. Like, again, even if you've never watched the original, and you really should, whenever you have a movie where characters fly, movie or TV show, I always compare it to the original Hocus Pocus, because that's kind of the gold standard to me for how that effect should look. So, a couple more scattered observations. The color grading is really good for this movie. Like the opening prologue, which tells the origin of the Sanderson sisters, the actresses playing them do good, and that's where Hannah Waddingham comes in, and she is just glorious. I don't think we needed that scene. But it does it in that way that a lot of young adult movies did that, you know, very pale, very muted colors. But then we jump to the present day, and the color scheme is so vibrant and brilliant and colorful. Like, I was worried based on that prologue, but then they only contained it to the prologue, which really worked as a stylistic choice. Let's see, what else was there? There's something else I'm building up to besides the ending. I'm trying to think. Oh, musical numbers are back too. Whereas, you know, in the first movie, they did a cover of I Put a Spell on You. Here, they did two. They did One Way or Another, which is really entertaining. But my favorite, which they didn't do for very long, like it was only under a minute, and I wish we got more of, they also did Elton John's The Bitch Is Back. Take a wild guess at what word they swapped. And that was really entertaining. The musical numbers are entertaining in this movie. Let's see. Color scheme, musical numbers. Okay. So here's my other really big critique, probably a nitpick. I don't like the costumes in this movie. I tried to find screenshots for comparison. A lot of them are not the best quality, so forgive me for what I could find. But, like, in the original Hocus Pocus, the actresses had these beautiful, vibrant costumes of these varying shades of color. Like, they just popped off screen. And in the sequel, their costumes look like replicas you'd buy at a Party City. They do not look good. And it's just, like, that was the one thing, as I kept watching this movie, I got so hung up on how bad the costumes look, especially compared to the original. Like, the robe Winifred wears over her dress is this dark green, almost black. And in this movie, it's much lighter in tone. You know, or Sarah's corset, for example, had these shades of purple mixed in with the pink, whereas here it's a very solid pink. And it does make sense, you know, the original costumes probably don't exist anymore. Actually, I think they do. I think they're on display in a museum somewhere. And if they do exist, they're probably not in a state to be worn, so they had to make new costumes, but just, you know, like I said, Party City, they're such a downgrade from the original costumes. And even Bette Midler's wig, like, there's a detail that Winifred has this extra curl from the back of her head that hangs down her shoulder all the way to her waist. And this movie seems to have omitted that in Winifred's wig. My God, I'm such a nerd that I caught such a small detail like that. But yeah, like, overall thoughts before I spoil the ending, because that's where a lot of my criticism is. It's a mixed movie. I liked it okay, not much more than that. This movie is made for fans of the original. So if you weren't a fan of the original, you're probably not going to like this. If you are, I hesitantly say check it out. You might get something out of it. But okay, spoiler time. about the ending. 3, 2, 1. Oh, hang on, low battery warning. There we go. Anyway, spoiler warning for the ending in 3, 2, 1. I hate the ending of this movie. Like, my God, that it comes completely out of left field, and just nothing else seems to suggest it, and it feels so unearned. So as I said, the Sanderson sisters' new plan is to cast a spell called Magicae Maxima, which would make them so ultimately powerful. They'd be the most powerful beings on Earth. And our protagonists discover that that kind of spell comes with a price. Power is meant to be shared, and if you're not going to share it, it's going to cost you the thing you love most. So here's the thing. For a brief moment, the Sanderson sisters win. They cast the Magicae Maxima. And then the price comes. In exchange for ultimate power, which Winifred gets, the spell kills Mary and Sarah. And Winifred gets despondent over this. Like, she is devastated and heartbroken. It's a good performance from Bette Midler, but again, the movie gives the Sanderson sisters this kind of sympathetic, almost happy ending. And then she realizes Izzy, one of the main protagonists, you know, like how Omri Katz' Max was the main protagonist, even though there was 3 of them. Same thing here with Izzy. Izzy, who we've learned is a witch. I said I wasn't going to spoil that, and I spoiled it. Winifred says she could undo the spell for her. Winifred couldn't undo the spell herself, but she could undo the spell for her. So Izzy recites the spell. It's called the Spell of Reunion, I think it was. And then after a moment, and then we kind of get the other twist here, the Magicae Maxima cost Winifred her sisters, and then the Spell of Reunion doesn't bring her sisters back. It sends Winifred to them. It's this very surprisingly well done emotional ending for the villains of the movie. Like, that is the frustrating thing. If you think about the original movie and this one, the Sanderson sisters, like, again, in the original movie, they wanted to consume the life force of children for eternal youth. Yes, it's portrayed very mystically, and it's explained with this very magical explanation, but they're cannibals. Like, again, very magically done, but the opening of the original movie is them cannibalizing a child. And almost this entire sequel for them has been a revenge quest. Nothing they've done warrants this kind of redemption or happiness. It's aggravating that it's like it ends on a happy note for them in a way. It's God, like, I was mixed on most of the movie. Again, there were things I liked, things I didn't like, but this ending nearly completely destroys it for me, Like, one of the main characters says, oh, they weren't evil. They had to do what they had to survive in their time. They're just misunderstood. No, they ate children. Like, I'm sorry. It's just, I'm going to go back and forth, going in a loop, saying the same thing over and over, ranting about this. But my God, the ending is so terrible. Like, it's like people criticize Cruella. I kind of like it. It's very soap opera trash, and I love it. But like, a lot of the things people say about making Cruella a sympathetic character, I still can't get used to the fact that the camera mirrors me. So yeah, Hocus Pocus 2. It was okay. I probably won't watch it again unless I'm with someone who wants to see it. But have you seen it? What are your thoughts? Please start a conversation in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. And in the description box below, you'll find the link to my Twitter where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.